Raising the Bets is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to Raising the Bets. We're a Catholic couple raising 5 kids outside of Boston. Join us as we share the joys and challenges of marriage, homeschool, our adventures near and far, as we make sense of the world and experience the best parts of our culture. I'm Tom Bettinelli.
And I'm Melanie Bettinelli.
She's bopping her head as I'm saying my script. Up, 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 up. So let's talk a little bit about what's been going on this week. You've been sick.
Yeah, I got a cold. I didn't even remember what day of the week it was. Like after that, everything's a blur.
It's fall cold time. A lot of people have a cold.
Yeah, lots of my friends have had colds this week. It feels like I don't even know where I picked it up. You know, Anthony was kind of under the weather a couple days this week, and so maybe he picked it up somewhere, like at Scouts.
Scouts is going to be the usual. Or the neighborhood kids, because our kids are playing with neighborhood kids now.
It's true.
They're not the strange homeschool kids who don't play with other kids.
He didn't have any like cold symptoms. Like he slept a lot.
Yeah.
And he was kind of tired, he was kind of tired and draggy. And one day I thought he kind of felt like he had a fever, but I didn't grab the thermometer. But I got the full on head cold.
Yeah. And Lucy had a fever last night on the way to bed.
Lucy had a fever last night. She fell asleep on the couch, but she hasn't really had any other symptoms. So I mean,
she kept asking for cowbell. I got a fever, and the only cure is more cowbell. That's from a Christopher Walken appearance.
Saturday Night Live. I remember seeing that one actually.
Anyway,
in any case, I mean, I suppose colds can present like with a variety of symptoms with different people. So who knows? Anyway, I was miserable. You ended up having to take Ben to an appointment because I couldn't take him
on Wednesday. Yeah, right after I recorded Secrets of Tech. You were saying, I'm going to have to cancel Ben's appointment. I just don't feel up to taking him. So I said, I'll go. I'll just, I can.
Of course, you told me that after I'd already called and left a voicemail canceling the appointment. So then I called and left another voicemail uncanceling the appointment and hoped that they got neither or both voicemails because like if they only got the first one and then rescheduled, that would have been a disaster.
Yeah. I can't imagine like they'd have someone on the hook. Can you be here in 20 minutes, or something, but
it was like more like 2 hours, but
no. Oh, wow. Okay. In any case, it was a 3-hour appointment. It was a long
appointment.
Yeah. I ended up sitting out there, and they have a desk there and they have Wi-Fi. So I was planning on doing some work, but there was this lady that was there that was hogging the desk. So even after her kid was done, she's doing like a Skype call in the waiting room. Without headphones. I'm like, I kind of wanted to like walk behind her and like pretend I was on the call with her and stuff. That would have been fun. Like make faces, pretend I'm going downstairs. Be really obnoxious. Anyway, but it was okay. Yeah, I mean, I actually ended up getting a few things done and reading my book, which was good.
I got a lot of books read, I have to say, because I didn't do much else this week.
You'll hear all about it in a few minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So today, because Lucy had a fever last night, you and she stayed home from Mass. So I took the others. And this happened to be the annual prayer shawl ministry Sunday. So our parish, we've mentioned it before, but I'll mention it again. Our parish has a prayer shawl ministry where some ladies in the parish, at the moment it's all ladies, but as Maxine, who's in charge of it, always says, we're always welcome to have some men come. Rosie Greer knitted famously, and I kind of want to tell her nobody knows who Rosie Greer is anymore.
Maxine is very sweet.
Yes. She starts by telling us, I've been a member of the parish for 43 years. So yeah, Rosie Greer, for those who don't know, is a famous football player from the 70s. So a very big black man who famously also knitted in the locker room. So he was like a fearsome football player. And so there was this interesting dichotomy between his size and masculinity and in knitting, but lots of guys knit.
Yeah.
So in any case, they have this ministry. They make blankets and shawls and baby blankets and even little prayer crosses, and they're blessed. Father blesses them, and then they give them to people who are in nursing homes or in hospitals, and they kind of, to wear or to hold in their lap when they're praying, or if they even can't pray, they, it's a comfort to them. And so Isabella quickly at the beginning of Mass was like, we should get one for Grandma. So I said at the end of Mass, and they give them away. They don't even sell them, it's beautiful. So at the end of Mass, Bella went and picked out a beautiful purple one.
Because your mother's favorite color is purple.
My mom's favorite color is purple. So, and then Bella and I went in to visit my mom at her nursing home. So just to give a quick update on my mom, she's in the later stages of dementia. Honestly, when we were there, she wasn't really conscious. She was out of it, like in and out of consciousness, like falling asleep. But yeah, she's not really there. And we gave her the blanket. I think she recognized it. Like even while she was sleeping, she kept patting it and rubbing it, like feeling the soft fabric, the soft yarn. And my brother and his wife, my brother Bernie, was there, Bernie and Carol. So that was nice. We caught up with them. And I feel like my mom, even though like I'm talking to Bernie and Carol, we're there with my mom, and just our conversation is helpful.
There's something really comforting when you're kind of sick and out of it, to just hear familiar voices having a conversation nearby. Like I've found that to be the case.
Right.
I remember when I had pneumonia, just kind of laying in the living room, listening to everyone talk and not being able to be part of the conversation, but just
and you don't have to
have everyone nearby.
Right. You don't have to, because other people are conversing. You can listen and not have to try to contribute to keep it going. You can just be there, and there can be a comfort in that. So, So if you just feel the urging to keep my mom in your prayers, because we just lost my dad, and my mom is now in these late stages, so it's been a little hard to see, but we're spending the time we can with her. So that's what's been going on. Let's talk about some things we've been cooking.
You've been cooking.
I've been cooking because you've not been feeling well. You made tacos earlier this week, which was good.
Did I? I made tacos. I did.
Yeah,
that was before I got sick.
Before you got sick. So, one of the few ground beef meals that you like to eat.
I don't really like ground beef very much.
It's very frustrating to me because I really like Korean beef bowl and other things like that. You just do not like that. And I want to eat it.
Korean beef bowl's okay. Like I'll eat it. But none of the kids really like it. So
when you like a thing and nobody else likes it, and so you can never have it.
Lots of things that I like that nobody likes.
Yes, this is true. So, I made a gumbo. We had sausage, an andouille sausage that had been in the freezer for too long, honestly.
Honestly, I would tell you not to stop buying andouille sausage because nobody wants it.
I bought it once because I was intending to use it right away. Which was probably right before the plumbing disaster. It's like it's been in there a long time.
A long time.
I probably should have just thrown it away because frankly, it was freezer burned and it tasted it, and it made the gumbo not taste great. I ate most of it because I like shrimp and I put a lot of shrimp in it, but nobody else really liked it. I think it would have been fine without that sausage, but it kind of gave it an off flavor. But we had a ton of frozen shrimp, and shrimp was on sale, so I'm like, I could use this, make gumbo, and then just replace the shrimp, put that in there. Because I also like to make shrimp tacos at some point. I like shrimp tacos.
I like shrimp tacos.
So that was a not so successful dinner. But then I made tonight. I made an instant pot beef stew. Now you may remember me making one not long ago that wasn't great. It was okay. This one was really good. Would you agree?
It was good.
Yes. So Would you agree? Yes, you agree. So
sorry, I'm kind of tired.
Yes,
I'm kind of spacing right now.
So the one I made before was called the absolute best instant pot beef stew. It was not.
It was not.
But this one is called pressure cooker American beef stew. This is a recipe from SeriousEats.com. I messed with the recipe a little bit. I didn't follow it exactly. But it starts with you take some. They have chicken stock, but I had a container of beef stock. I like that. And they want you to put gelatin and tomato paste in it, and I didn't use either of those. The gelatin to make it a thicker sauce, which I like a thicker sauce, but there's other ways to do it. I didn't want gelatin. So soy sauce, anchovies. I had anchovy paste in a tube, so I used that, and Worcestershire sauce. So basically, a flavor blast, right? And like an umami blast. That's what that is. So between anchovies, soy sauce, fish, Worcestershire sauce, and if I'd used tomato paste, it would have been even more. So they want you to like put it in a blender, but I think mainly if you used actual anchovies and tomato paste, you would need a blender. I just whisked it because it wasn't that big a deal. So you take the beef, and I had some stew meat in some sirloin tips, both of which I'd gotten on sale over the summer and had been in there in a while. So I just chopped them up. I've learned when you want to make beef stew, you got to cut them small, like half-inch cubes, quarter-inch even, like small. If those big hunks of meat, you just can't, like if it's more than a bite, then you got to cut it, or you're like chewing it and, taking bites off the fork. Yeah, it's not fun. So you brown that off in the Instant Pot or the pressure cooker, and then you take whatever like liquid is in there and you pour that in with the mixture of the stock mixture that you made, and then you brown mushrooms, and then you add in carrots and onion, and I added celery. That wasn't on their list, but celery. What was
garlic?
Didn't add the garlic at this point. I wanted to hold the garlic because if I put it, well, I just mentioned I already did the mushrooms.
I don't know.
So anyway, so then you brown those up, and then you take them out. So the meat you've taken out, cooked. Then you cook the vegetables. You take those out. Then you take half an onion, whole carrot, whole celery, and then they want you to put the garlic in. But again, I didn't want to put the garlic in at this point. And you brown those, the whole. This is separate from the ones you chopped, because these are going to add flavor when you cook the meat. Because one of the problems with Instant Pot stews with vegetables is if you cook the vegetables the whole time with the meat, they just turn to mush. They just
because you want your meat to be falling apart. You don't want your vegetables to be falling apart.
Exactly. So it's always going to be done 2 stages, but you want the meat and the stock, the liquid, to get the vegetable flavors. So this is the trick how they do it. So you add the whole vegetables at this point, and then you add some wine.
Basically, you're making the vegetable stock flavor. Like if you used a homemade stock, you would have the vegetable flavor already in the broth.
I think you want even more vegetable flavor.
Vegetable flavor?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you could kind of use like vegetable ends, but that's kind of messy at this point because you want to be able to pull them out after cooking.
Right.
So you add some wine. I had some red wine, not quite enough, so I added some sherry to go with it. It worked out fine. It was good. And you reduce that a little. Then you add in this stock mixture. So you get that in there, and then you add the meat. So they use steaks. What was the meat? They had a boneless beef chuck roast cut into 3 steaks. Like I didn't do the chuck roast. Chuck roast would be fine, but I had this stew meat, so I just used that. Then I tossed the meat with some flour at this point, and that goes in, and then you with some thyme and bay leaf. Then you pressure cook it on high for like 30 minutes. Then fish out the carrot and the celery and the bay leaves, the onion end, like the big hunk of onion. You pull that out. So the celery was gone, like it had given its all. it was just limp and blech. But the carrot was actually pretty good. It was like tender, but not mushy. So I sliced up the carrot and set it aside. And then I added in all of the vegetables that I'd previously cooked and set aside and that had been chopped. Those go in with the meat. And this is when I added the garlic and I left the garlic fairly whole. They have you like leave it unpeeled. I kind of crunched and peeled it. Yeah, because you're discarding it. Oh. You're letting see in that first pressure cook, it's giving its all and it's going to disintegrate into the liquid.
Oh,
but I didn't really want to do that. I wanted to have the hunk of garlic in the shorter cook. I think you get a better garlic flavor, and I think it was better that way, honestly. So you put all the vegetables in now with the meat, and you pressure cook that for another 15 minutes. And then when that's done, and you do like rapid pressure release, like to get it open. And then I add some frozen peas. This is when I added in the reserved carrot from the previous pressure cook. And then I really didn't need to add salt. I did. That was a mistake. It was too salty. It wasn't like inedible salty, but it was more salt than it needed. It was fine. It gets plenty of salt from the meat because you salt the meat before you sear it. And then the soy sauce and the Worcestershire had plenty of salt. So that was kind of a mistake.
And anchovies are usually pretty salty too.
Yeah, right. So, but everybody liked it. I mean, Sophie's not a big fan of stew. She had some, but everybody else had multiple bowls. Even Ben, who doesn't have a big appetite for dinner. So that was really good. It really successful. So I'll put a link to that. Oh, I forgot about the potatoes. There was also some potatoes in there that went in with the vegetables. Those don't get pre-cooked at all. They go into the final 15-minute pressure cook. And
that was enough.
Yeah, everything came out perfectly tender, nothing too mushy. The meat was nice, fall apart tender. The broth was really flavorful. I mean, the broth could have been thicker. I could have added flour and cooked it down a bit and that sort of thing in the Instant Pot, but I didn't want to. I mean, I suppose if I wanted thicker, I could have added the gelatin in the beginning and be done with it. But I'm not even sure we have gelatin, but
we probably do somewhere.
Yeah. So that was really good. That was a good, successful one. And one last thing about a food related thing, the cucumber trick. I don't think I've mentioned this before, but so in case I haven't, you'll have to excuse me if I have, because I have a terrible memory. When we have salads with dinner, it takes about half a regular cucumber between our two salads, because only Melanie and I will eat the salad. Lucy will sometimes eat cucumbers.
Yeah, I usually just give the extra half of the cucumber to Lucy, so I end up using.
She won't eat it all though. She'll leave. I throw away a lot of cucumber from her. She doesn't eat it all. So I mean, I could cut some extra up for her. But if I've got leftover cucumber, one of the bad things about cucumbers, if you put it in the fridge, it just turns to mush and it's gross and disgusting, and you have to throw it away in the next day or two. To preserve it, the best way to do this is, as long as it's not peeled, right? Don't peel the whole thing. Just peel the half that you're using and leave the other half unpeeled. Take a paper towel, a double, fold it over, so double width of paper towel, and wrap it around the end, the cut end, and then put it in a Ziploc bag and seal it up and put it in the fridge. And it will last for days, like a week even. The very end will get mushy and a little bit gross. So you just slice that off and the rest of it's still crispy and good. It's fascinating. It's really awesome because I've thrown so many cucumbers away over the years. It's nice to be able to not have to waste it if I'm not going to use a whole cucumber. So just a little tip. So that's food. Let's talk about things we've been watching. You and I started watching a new Netflix series called Inside Man, and it stars David Tennant and Stanley Tucci, and it's written and produced by Stephen Moffat, who you would know from either Doctor Who. He was the showrunner when it was not David Tennant, when it was the Matt Smith and Peter Capaldi doctors. He's also did the Benedict Cumberbatch Sherlock, one of the best TV shows ever. So he's a really good writer, always very interesting. His dialogue is fun. So the premise is Stanley Tucci is on death row in Nevada, I think. Looks like Nevada or Arizona or something.
Yeah, I don't know if they ever say where it is.
Somewhere in the desert Southwest.
Yeah.
He's on death row. He's a professor of criminology who murdered his wife. And he's the death row detective. People come to him with cases, things they need solved, and he'll take certain cases and they'll present their mystery to him and he will solve it for them if he so chooses. So that's one part of the story. The other part of the story, David Tennant is a vicar, an Anglican priest in England who's got a wife and a teenage son, an older teenage son.
You really don't want to go into any details because anything you say about David Tennant's character will spoil it.
And the son has this math tutor who comes around to help him. And there's this investigative reporter who's friends with the math tutor and is also interviewing the Stanley Tucci character. And yeah, I don't want to spoil anything too much, but it is such a well-written show. There are levels and depths to it. Things like when he's solving a case and the death row detective is solving a case. He's interviewing someone for the case and he asks them questions. And the person that is asking, there'll be nonverbal cues that you as the viewer, if you're paying attention, as some people don't do in this in this couple. Someone's often looking at their phone playing with puzzles or whatever. You will see things on screen and go, oh, that is a total clue. That is like, and they don't call it out. They don't tell you. If you pick it up, power to you. But if you don't pick it up, it'll eventually you'll get things revealed. But it's really fun that way. Couple caveats. There's a very big subject matter related to abuse of children.
Yeah.
It's talked about. You don't see anything, but it's talked about. So if you're sensitive to that, this may not be for you. Also, there's a lot of glib talk about murder and death.
Yeah.
It's sort of a signature, almost like with certain British writers like Moffat, where they're kind of like glib and funny, snarky about something that's very serious, like mass murderer or serial killer, that sort of thing. So that may disturb some people. But that said, it's really clever, well acted, and I mean it's left you and me talking, like, because we've only seen half of it, so it's 4 episodes. And oh, maybe Inside Man means more than just the guy on death row. Maybe it means X. And maybe the fact that the cases involve these things are related to this other thing. So it's one of those things that gets us talking. I mean, so What do you think?
I think that I can't watch the last 2 episodes fast enough. We're taking too long. That's what I think.
Well, we maybe if there's not a new episode of The Rookie after we're done recording, we can watch that.
Yeah, I'm really, really liking it. I love Stanley Tucci. He's such a great actor.
Oh yeah.
And David Tennant. David Tennant does a lot of things well, including being kind of creepy.
Well, when he was Kilgrave in
Jessica Jones,
yeah.
One of the creepiest characters I've ever seen.
Yes.
He also does funny well. Like his doctor is frequently funny.
What?
and he does pathos well, like in Broadchurch.
Broadchurch, right?
He's just such a versatile actor, and I enjoy watching him work. And his characters are not they're not all the same guy. Some actors are really good at playing that guy.
They're character
actors.
Yeah, or leading man actors. They play themselves essentially.
Tennant, I really feel like
he's a character actor.
Yeah.
He inhabits a role. Yeah, I agree. And there's this quirk in the vicar. So he's a vicar, he's a priest, where he keeps saying things like, "I'm a vicar," as an explanation. Like,
Why are you doing this? Well, I'm a vicar.
I'm a vicar. Like, I can't do that. I'm a vicar. Like, but he keeps saying I'm a vicar all the time as excuse or explanation or I can't do that I can't tell you that. Why not? I'm a vicar. Like, it's become almost a mantra for the character, and I think a clue to things about what's going on. I think it's fascinating to see. So anyway, Inside Man is really fantastic. So I really recommend it. Now, again, as usual, we have not seen the whole thing. So if in the last 2 episodes it goes really off the rails and becomes offensive, don't blame us. We haven't seen the whole thing yet. So that being said, you have any other thoughts?
No, I just
really good.
Yeah.
So the other thing that we watched is today we rewatched, you and I, and the kids watched for the first time, the first episode of the Ms. Marvel series.
Which was, I enjoyed watching it again. I picked up on a lot of things that it moves very fast. It's a quick paced show.
Yeah.
And so I picked up on a lot more subtle things that I missed the first time through.
A lot of groundwork is laid in that first episode that pays off later. And once you know the payoff, it lands very differently in the first episode, especially the mom.
Details that didn't seem important or that you just went by so fast you didn't even catch them.
Right.
But knowing how the show works, I was more likely to.
Especially with the mom's personality. Like, because when you first watch it, it seems like she's typical overbearing immigrant mom. That's like, it's a stereotype.
Almost a stereotype, yeah.
The second time through, now knowing her and her history and seeing how sympathetic of a character she becomes, it's very different. Now it's not just an overbearing immigrant mom stereotype. There's a whole nother level there.
Right. Like, I really thought that they did a good job of not exactly undermining the stereotypes, but deepening the people and making them rounded so that they went beyond their stereotypes.
Yeah.
Very well.
Yeah. It's good. I'm not sure the kids know where to take this yet, which is I think where we were after watching the first one.
After the first episode, I was like, this could be interesting, but I don't really know where it's going yet.
It doesn't really hit its stride. I mean, it's good from the beginning, but you don't really get invested until 2 or 3 episodes in.
Yeah. I think that right now we're just going to have to let them see what's going on. And then
right.
I think they'll be excited about it by the end of the show. But right now they're just kind of like, that was okay.
Bella was saying she doesn't like movies or TV shows about teens.
Well, I think a lot of the tropes that get thrown out there in teen stories are a lot about like teens rebelling, teens, hiding things from their parents, sneaking out, doing things that they were specifically told not to do.
All things that makes Isabella.
She really,
she does not like that.
She really doesn't like that kind of situational tension, that dramatic tension.
Right.
When somebody's specifically doing something they were told not to do.
She's a rule follower. So there is a little bit of that in the first episode.
There's a little bit, but there's not as much as in some. Like Spider-Man, I think really hit her nerves a lot. Peter Parker is just very much
he's constantly breaking the rules.
A non-rule follower.
Yeah.
Whereas I think Ms. Marvel has some. She's kind of, but she's generally doesn't try to defy her parents. Her general attitude towards her parents is not defiance so much as, why don't you understand me better?
Yes.
And I think that that's more sympathetic than the defiant teen who's just like always assumes that their parents are wrong.
Right. So yeah, I think they'll enjoy it. And really, this is the last Marvel thing. I think we've mentioned before the last Marvel thing. I'm still thinking about what to watch next. If we watch anything, Bella's been wanting to watch football, so maybe we'll take a break and finish watching.
I'm not sure if everybody's as invested in football as she is.
I know it's hard. It gets hard because they want to. The other thing we have to do is finish watching The Chosen season 2 because The Chosen season 3 comes out like later this week.
Yep.
So we gotta get caught up.
The other thing we watched this week was the most recent episode of Andor, which I think that show has hit its stride.
Yes.
There were three amazing speeches in that show. There was Kino's,
the rallying cry.
Oh, it was brilliant. That was just a great.
There is one way out.
And
Andy Serkis was fantastic.
Oh, that was a fabulous. That scene was just perfect. And then Luthen's speech was brilliant. What has he given up for the rebellion? What has he sacrificed for the cause?
Yes.
And that was just so good. And then Mon Mothma had a great character moment too. Less a speech, but more of a scene. But her scene was really a great character scene too. So yeah, that episode was fabulous.
So there was an interesting critique of the show, and so, I think it wasn't Father Corey. It was someone else was saying, I agree that the show is about the big picture of the rebellion, right? Because it's not just about Cash and Andor's journey. It's Luthen and Mon Mothma. And it's like, so why does Andor end up being the center of it? You know, Dedra and the ISB and Cyril seem as the key to finding the main rebels. He was pivotal in the heist at Aldhani, which seems to turn the Empire into the ruthless thing we know in Rogue One. So why is he in the middle of all that? And so on and so forth. And I said, I don't think the series is supposed to be about the center of the rebellion. It's otherwise it would be called Mothma or Rael, which is Luthen's last name. You know, I think Andor is supposed to be Cashin is supposed to be representative of all the individuals who make up the rebellion. It's not about George Washington. It's about Benjamin Talmadge. Talmadge was Washington's spy master. You know, he was, a lower level soldier who was important.
But I also think that one of the things that this show is doing is it's taking Andor, who was not the main character in Rogue One. Jyn Erso was the hero in Rogue One. But Andor was a secondary character who played a large role.
Pivotal.
He was a pivotal character in Rogue One. But he has a character moment in Rogue One that I think even at the time stood out for me as being something I would like to have explored, which is he says something to Jen about the things that he has done in the cause of the rebellion that he is not proud of. Like he has done bad things. And I think that made him an interesting character. And I think one of the things this show is about, I think perhaps the thing the show is about is I have done bad things for the sake of the rebellion. And I think we see that in Luthen, and I think we see that in Mon Mothma, and we saw Gerrera shows up. And I think that what we're seeing here is the dark side of the rebellion. That the rebellion is not made up of saints. It is made up of very fallible men and women.
All rebellions are made up of people of varying motivations and varying morality. You know, you have Saw Gerrera, who's basically an anarchist. He just wants to see the galaxy burn. He's angry and wants to hurt the people who have hurt him. And then you have Mon Mothma, who would love to peacefully bring about a change and, return to a republic and that sort of thing. Then you have sort of Luthen, who's kind of halfway between them.
Well, see, I think Luthen is
he's more closer to Saw.
Right. Luthen reminds me a lot of Sam Adams in the American Revolution.
Yes.
He understands that unless things get really hot and uncomfortable, most people will continue to be happy enough with the Empire. They might grumble, they might complain, they might not like it, but they're not going to rise to rebellion unless they get outraged. Yeah. And Luthen is willing to organize the outrage even at the cost of innocent lives. And you see that sort of organization in Sam Adams. He wants to organize the outrage because that's the only way that he's going to get what he wants.
He wants the cause, like Sam Adams wanted the English to react against Americans in order to get the Americans to get riled up, even if that caused bloodshed among Americans. Yeah, and that's clearly Luthen. And Luthen clearly sees, he doesn't envision being around to see the benefits of what he's doing.
No.
I'm real curious about his background. Where did he come from? I saw someone speculating he might have been a Jedi, but I don't think we've
seen anything that leads to
well, he had the Kyber crystal. That's the only real clue.
He had a Kyber crystal, but
what I mean, he had a Kyber crystal.
But
well, regardless, I'm curious about his background and how he got to be who he is. That's an interesting open question.
Right. But I think that even so, the show is still clearly about Andor. I think partly because Luthen is a new character, building a show around a completely new character, while it can be done, let's see The Mandalorian. I think that there's a reason to explore more of Andor, who we saw in Rogue One.
But what we're seeing is Cassian's journey. He starts at the beginning of this as his own man. He's not a rebel. He's not
at all interested in the rebellion.
And even at Aldhani, he's a mercenary. It's this time in the prison. This is a bit spoilery, I guess, but it's this time in the prison that really sets him on the road to being a rebel. And I think that's what this show is about, is how does a guy become a rebel, and not just any rebel, but a rebel par excellence, which will eventually be in Rogue One.
Right. It's really about that journey from every man for himself to standing for something bigger, for a cause.
Right.
And how do you become a partisan in a cause, especially when you're not a nice guy, not an idealist? I mean, in a way, it's not entirely different from Han Solo's character arc.
Right.
Han Solo is a rogue, a mercenary, and he gets caught up in the rebellion, but he gets caught up in the later stages of the rebellion.
He's in for the money. He's not for anything else. Right.
Until he's kind of in it for something else.
Well, at the very end, like he gets his money. He's going to leave. He comes back, saves Luke. They blow the Death Star. Yes.
But even then, you get the feeling it's more about loyalty to Luke and Leia than about the rebellion, the cause of the rebellion. Like, you never really get the sense that Han is a true believer in the rebellion.
Right. It's loyalty to these people. Right. And against the Empire is bad. I mean, it's bad. And while he may not be an idealist about rebellion, he knows enough that maybe I should throw in my lot with these guys rather than those guys. Anyway, we should move on because we got plenty to talk about with the books that you've read.
Yes.
So the first book that you wrote down is The Dark Lord of Dirkholm by Diana Wynne Jones.
This was a fun one. The basic premise of Dark Lord of Dirkholm is LARPing, live action role playing, Dungeons and Dragons. So imagine people who want to have the Dungeons and Dragons experience for real. And imagine that somebody figures out how to get into a parallel universe where magic works and decides to take tours of people on quests.
Kind of like Westworld, but not with robots.
Never saw Westworld, but
okay.
Sure. But the problem is that this is, an actual world where people live, but this guy has managed to somehow have control over the inhabitants such that they have to participate in his LARP.
Okay.
But it's not really role playing because people actually die. Crops are actually destroyed, cities pillaged.
Are the tourists killed too?
Some of the tourists are killed because some of them are marked as expendable because somebody has paid large sums of money to have them knocked off.
Okay, but normally they wouldn't be.
Normally, no. But so one person every year is picked to play the Dark Lord because every quest has to have a Dark Lord, and so this is about the story of the guy who gets to be picked to be Dark Lord who doesn't want to be. And he's a magician who would rather be creating fanciful animals like griffins and flying pigs than participating in this stupid LARPing thing.
Okay.
And then it's about sort of, well, it's actually kind of about a rebellion. Like, how do we overthrow the actual Dark Lord
who's controlling
everything and making us participate in this horrible venture that nobody really wants to be a part of.
Huh. It's interesting. It's almost a little bit like Ready Player One in some ways.
Yeah, I mean, there's a sort of an anti-colonialism theme going on, because like their world is being exploited by somebody from another world. But there's a lot of really fun fantasy tropes that it's poking around at. And it's a good family story. Like, the center of this story is a father, a mother, and their children, and the family working together, sometimes well, sometimes pulling apart, but it's about a family. And I really liked that. So I read it, and then I had the kids. The kids have all been reading it.
It's YA fiction.
It's not even YA. It's juvenile fiction. Like, there's nothing in it that I mean, there's death, but nothing horrible and gory.
Right.
So it's fantasy.
Okay. Suitable for all ages.
Suitable for all ages.
Okay.
It has a lot of similar tone to like Howl's Moving Castle or her Customancy books. They're fantasy. They have some dark moments, but there's nothing really too grim.
Okay. Next book was The Spy Who Came In From the Cold.
Yeah, which technically was the one I read before that, but I put them down out of order.
We're just talking about them in this order.
Right. So Spy Who Came In From the Cold is the third of John le Carré's George Smiley novels. George Smiley is not the protagonist. The protagonist is another spy and George Smiley is sort of a very small minor character in the story.
Okay.
This one got dark. It's like there's like double agents turning against each other, and
this might be the most famous of his books, right?
This one or the Tinker Tailor Soldier.
Oh, Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. Yeah.
Yeah. I always get that title wrong because I think of the nursery rhyme rather than the book. Anyway, yeah, this one is one of his more famous novels. It ended on a really dark note, and I'm not sure how much I liked it. Like, it was much more classic Cold War era spy fiction. And it was a bit more of a slog. Okay. Like, it was okay. I can see why it's famous. I'm still thinking about it. I'm maybe I will like it better in context of the later books, but I'm taking a break from Jean le Carré for now and reading some other stuff. Okay. I've had enough spy novels. And then what else did I read? You read a book that I talked about last week, that I finished last week, Dead Man's Hand by James J. Butcher. Right. I had a similar reaction to you. It's definitely a first novel. Right. Which is not always bad, but you know, first novels, like, it takes novelists a little bit to find their feet. And I feel like he's got a voice. He's got a voice. He's got promise. This definitely feels like he's still learning the craft. Not unlike his father's first novel, The Dresden Files. The first 3 or 4 Dresden Files novels are very formulaic. And honestly, if they didn't get better, I'm not sure I would be recommending the series as much as I do. But they get better. Right. So, I mean, there's promise here. It could definitely get better. And it was a fun read. The one thing I will say is that it's set in Boston, and I have no idea why, because there is nothing about it that needed to be set in Boston. Yeah. And except where the narrator was specifically telling us that we were in Boston. There's nothing very Boston about any of it. It didn't feel Boston. And when it did tell me I was in Boston, it was jarring. Like, it threw me out of the story, and I was like, wait, we're in Boston? Now I'm trying to like make my mental map of this book fit onto Boston. But only because you live here. Like, if you lived somewhere else and weren't familiar with Boston, it would have just been generic city. But it really feels very generic city. Yeah. I mean, there's a mention of South Station, which felt completely wrong to anybody who actually has ridden in the trains. Because it was in South Boston, which it's not. And he talked about the trains coming through like it's a subway station, but it's not. It's a train station, end of the line. Well, so there's platforms. Well, it's the what's tricky is that it's both a subway station and
there's a subway station underneath South Station called the South Station Stop.
But the narrative was confused because he's supposed to be getting on the train for Worcester, which is a commuter train, but it's written as if
it's a subway.
It's a subway train, except that neither the commuter train nor the subway train has luggage racks. So that really, totally. Having spent a lot of time on Boston's public transport in my graduate school days, it just completely threw me out of the narrative, and I was like, "Wait, what's going on here? Where are we? I don't understand."
He's describing something. I'm picturing it one way, and then he says something. I'm like, "Wait a minute, that's completely different." And then I have to remap my entire mental image of what he's talking about. Yeah.
But those are quibbles.
Yeah.
I liked the characters. I liked the story. It felt like there were maybe one too many MacGuffins that he was chasing. Like it got to be a little bit formulaic. Now we have to chase this thing, which will lead us to this thing, which will then lead us to another thing. And then we have to go to the next thing. Very
much like a movie or TV show. Like it's a very clear this to that, to that, to that. Right. Yeah. There was, this clue puzzle piece leads to that next puzzle piece leads to the next one.
Which again, that feels like a thing that a beginning novelist uses, like a device, let's say. It's not bad. It kind of feels like you're painting by numbers a little bit.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, I still recommend it. It's still pretty good. I'm looking forward to seeing what's next. I'd put it that way. If his father's track record is any measure, I'm willing to give James J. Butcher a little bit of slack and see what's coming from him. So, good. Anything else? I think that's it, right? You've got stuff that you're still working on, but nothing completed.
Nothing finished yet.
So let's finish up by talking about the readings for this week. Now, again, I went to our parish with some of the kids because of Lucy was sick, and you watched the TV Mass with her. So we had a couple of different experiences. Ours was Deacon Bob, who gave the homily, and the readings were the four last things: heaven, hell, death, and
purgatory,
judgment.
Purgatory.
Yeah, death. Yeah. So I'm not sure why I couldn't get that. So one of the things that Deacon Bob he started talking about was like he used to drive across Pennsylvania a lot when he was taking his sons to school in Ohio, which I don't know if that meant Steubenville or not, but in any case, he said they would always see these trucks, these tractor trailer trucks, who must have been for a Christian trucking company or Christian owned, and because they would say on them "the end." And they had, Bible verse on them. And he says, well, that hits you between the eyes. I'm sitting there thinking, yeah, well, if that truck hit you between the eyes, yes, it would be the end. It was sort of a jarring note. But he asks, so why does the church keep bringing this up every year? Why do we every November have to talk about heaven, hell, death, and purgatory? Why do we got to talk about these very sad things? And it's like, you're right. Why do we? And part of it is we get wrapped up in things. We forget what's most important, that this life is just a moment. It's just, it's not everything.
Can I make a confession?
What?
I always look forward to this part of the liturgical year.
You love talking about heaven, hell, death, and purgatory?
I do. I really like this part of the year. I like the end time stuff. I mean, not like in a creepy way, but just I appreciate I guess I appreciate both the idea that these come sort of as the year is dying, as I'm starting to feel kind of a lowering of spirits as the days are getting shorter and the year is getting colder and everything is dying. I kind of, part of me sort of revels in the fact that we can just spend some time thinking about death. Also, yeah, I appreciate the wake up call, the reminder. Like, right. It is beneficial to me to be reminded that this world isn't the only things. And
it's appropriate because we're about to head into a period where we're going to be talking about anticipation of Christ. And Advent is not just about, the anticipation of the birth of the baby, but I want to see the baby, but the anticipation of the return of Christ and the second coming.
Right. So I feel like the lead into from thinking about the last things to thinking about the return of Christ the King at the end of time. And then we slip back into thinking about Christ's first coming and his last coming sort of at the same time. I really like the way it all wraps up, the way we go into the darkness in preparation for Christmas. Like it feels like this is the beginning of the preparation for Christmas, really.
Right. Well, like the carol in the bleak midwinter.
Yeah. We got to talk about the death.
Which again, I got to point out, this must land very differently for people in the Southern Hemisphere for whom this is spring, and actually in some ways even better because it reminds us of the new life that comes with heaven and death and, what comes after that. It reminds it. So it's not necessarily a focus on death and decay, but on death and new life. For
us as Christians, death isn't the end. I mean, it's not.
It's just the beginning. As Amazing Grace says, when we've been dead 10,000 years, we're just getting started. So yeah. So the gospel reading talks a lot about persecution. Jesus, everyone's admiring the temple. Ooh, look how nice the temple is. Wow, look how costly the stones are. And oh, it's so well appointed. And Jesus comes along and goes, pretty soon, not one stone will be standing on another, and the whole thing's going to be thrown down. And thanks, Jesus, for bringing us all down. But, they're like, teacher, what? When's this going to happen? And so he's talking about, for the immediate answer of the prophecy is when the Romans are going to destroy the temple in 70 AD, but also when his body of the temple of his body is destroyed in the crucifixion is thrown down. And he tells us, like, look, we're going to be persecuted, and we're persecuted today. This is something Father Deacon Bob brought up was, not only is there persecutions around the world, like our Nigerian brothers and sisters who are being martyred by the day in Pakistan and other countries, but even here, there's persecution. We have crisis pregnancy centers, 75 of them burned over the past summer. I mean, 75 of them, vandalized and attacked. Churches being attacked, and it's only going to get worse because we profess Jesus. This is something we have to be, ready for. But these readings are about hope. They're not just about bad things. It's about hope. And that's one of the things that Andor, the series, to kind of close the loop on that, is really about. It's about hope. Like there's very little hope at the beginning of that series, but they're holding on to hope. Hope is what gets them out of the prison, and hope is what gets them to to rebel. Like if you don't have any hope, there's no point. You could be Saw Gerrera, who just wants to curse the darkness as you go down, taking as many of them with you as you can, or you can hope and hope for better. And like Mon Mothma does, there's a better day coming. And Jyn Erso in Rogue One, rebellions are built on hope. And in a way, we're rebelling against the darkness in this, rebelling against death, rebelling against sin and the devil, because we have hope. And these readings tell us something about hope. It's interesting to me that Jesus says to them, when you are persecuted and handed over, it will lead to your giving testimony. Remember, you are not to prepare your defense beforehand. Yet in 1 Peter 3:15, what does Peter say? Always be ready to give a defense. I know they're two different things. They're talking about two different things, but I just think it's kind of funny.
Be ready, but
don't prepare. Don't prepare a speech. Yeah.
Right.
Jesus will give you the words, the Holy Spirit. Well, frankly, because you'd be concerned, like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be expected to stand up and defend Christianity. I can't do that. It's like, don't worry about it. The Holy Spirit will get you. We got you. And, you'll be hated because of my name. But not a hair of your head will be destroyed. There's an interesting point there, okay? Because obviously many martyrs have been murdered, have been killed, but not destroyed. That's, I think, a difference. I should look up the Greek that's used there, because it's probably in the sense of you're not annihilated, you're not caused to cease to exist from history, but that, you will live on. They can put your body to death, but you will continue to live. And I think it's
the sense of death has no power over me.
Right. It's powerless over the martyrs. You can take their lives, but you can't take their eternal life. You thought I was going to say freedom, didn't you?
I was personally thinking about one of my favorite movies when I was, a teenager was Labyrinth. You remember, with David Bowie?
David Bowie, yes. I'll make a confession that I've never saw it.
Never saw it. Anyway, the teenage girl who, very much reminded me of myself as a teenage girl, she finally confronts the Goblin King and she says, "And you have no power over me." And it's a revelation. As she's saying it, she finally realizes that he doesn't have any power. And that line always just really hit me strongly. And I think it's because that line is the echo of that's what Jesus says. You, death, have no power over me. You, sin, have no power. And so I think that, that's why I loved Labyrinth, because of that speech. You don't have any power over me.
Right. There's what was the verse? 1 Corinthians 15:55. "Oh, death, where is your victory? Where is your sting?" That you have no power. You really, you can put this body to death, but you can't annihilate me. You can't remove me from existence. You have no power over that. And that's the hope that we have. That's the hope that these readings give. So they're not negative. They're not a downer. They're hope. So, and they're leading up to, in a couple weeks, Christ the King.
Next week.
Wow. Is that next week already?
It's next week.
Wow. That's right. Because in 2 weeks is going to be the first Sunday of Advent, which came really quick, like it does every year. I know we always say that every year. It came quick, but this one, that is Christ the King next week.
Yep.
Well, and that makes it all the more appropriate that this week is the end and next week is the coronation.
Yep.
So cool.
So awesome. Today we, so I was not I will confess, I was not particularly interested in watching Catholic TV Mass. I've been increasingly annoyed by the
ADD camera direction.
The cameras just want to wander everywhere, and honestly,
it's really distracting.
Bishop Reed, I love you, but can we just skip the needing to interrupt? We have the opening prayer, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, and then service announcement from Bishop Reed, which is basically a commercial. I don't want that in my Mass.
Right.
I don't. Put it before, put it after the closing prayer, the opening prayer, but not
after the opening prayer once Mass is started. It's just really jarring to me. It is weird that they put it there.
I think they're trying to fit. Well, one of the things is the Mass actually is on live on local TV.
Right. It has to fit in with the 28 minutes.
Fit in their very, very short time span. But it's annoying. But Lucy really wanted to watch it, and she couldn't go to Mass. So who am I to say no to the cute 9-year-old girl who really wants to
watch the Mass on TV
because she can't go receive communion.
Right.
And my diligence was rewarded because the homily was on Father Cizik, who's one of my favorites.
Mm-hmm.
So he wrote With God in Russia and He Leadeth Me, his 2 books about his experience. Father Cizik was an American Jesuit priest who felt a very strong call to go minister to Eastern Rite Catholics in Russia.
In the Soviet Union, so during the Cold War.
Before.
Right.
He was called before World War II.
Yeah, that's Well, before the Cold War, but it was still the Soviet Union.
Right. But before World War II, he wanted to go minister to. He went to Rome. He studied. He was ordained. He studied. He was by ritual. He knew the Eastern Rite as well as the Western. Anyway, and then he couldn't go to Russia because they were blocking Catholic priests. And so he ended up ministering in Poland, and then Russia invaded Poland, so Russia came to him.
Right.
And he ended up going to Russia, being imprisoned in solitary confinement, and then
in the Gulag.
And then he was sent to the gulags.
And then sent to the Gulag. Yeah.
His story is amazing, and I love him so much. He's just one of my great spiritual mentors. His book, He Leadeth Me, has been one of the most formative books I've read. And so to have I was having a very low, do I really want to do this day? And the homily just felt like a little love letter from God. Just like, here, think about one of your favorite people. Father they don't have very long to do the homily, so he didn't have long time to tie it in to the readings. He basically just talked about Father Cizik. I don't think he spent a lot of time talking about how Jesus is talking about persecutions, and here's somebody who was experiencing persecutions, but it was there.
Right.
Anyway, just wanted to throw that out there because it made my day.
I was just looking up who the pastor is there, and trying to find on their website and trying to find the staff listing. And of course, the website doesn't have it really. Staff. Oh, collaborative staff.
There you go.
Father Millick. Father Adrian Millick.
Adrian Millick, yes.
Yeah.
Very young priest.
Yeah, I remember him. He is pretty young.
Oh.
All these priests who I remember being ordained are now like pastors and stuff. I'm like, oh, I'm old.
Yeah, so he's from the parishes that are just in the next town over.
From us. Yeah.
St. Bridget in Abington and Holy Ghost in Whitman.
Holy Ghost is the one that has perpetual adoration.
We do, which I haven't been to in far too long, but
yeah,
I used to go.
It's like 24-hour adoration, which is really nice. All right. We want to wrap things up by taking a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create Raising the Bets, including Robert O., Jackford K., Denise L., David J., and Chris E. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue Raising the Bets and all the shows at StarQuest. And you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. And that's it for this time. Find links from our discussion in our show notes at sqpn.com/bets. That's BETTS. Send your feedback at the StarQuest Facebook page, facebook.com/StarQuestMedia. Send us an email at bets@sqpn.com or visit the StarQuest Discord community at sqpn.com/discord. Follow Raising the Bets in Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, your favorite podcast app, or at the StarQuest YouTube channel, where you should also make sure to hit the bell to get notifications. Until next time, I'm Don Bettinelli.
And I'm Melanie Bettinelli.
Thank you for listening to Raising the Bets on StarQuest. Here's another show on the StarQuest network you're sure to enjoy. Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. Find the show wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/mysterious.